Airport employees of Reddit. What is the strangest, funniest, scariest thing that happened at your airport? Story 1. Another one, this time from my dad. We're coming off a plane at Lagos Airport. It's 1992. I'm about 10 years old, so I wander around the baggage hall and find in a secluded corner a service lift with a bloody great hole cut out of the door. It's cordoned off so you can't use it. I ask my dad about it. A cleaner had been using the service lift one night after a shift to go back up to the departure area where he could stash his trolley, etc. Lift breaks down between floors. The emergency help button does nothing. This is Nigeria, remember. And of course, it's way before mobile phones were even introduced. He pounds and pounds on the interior of the lift, but it's in a quiet bit of the airport where no one goes. He's not scheduled to be on shift the next day. His colleagues come in and assume the trolley has been stolen as the cupboard is open and it's not there. They carry on. When they try to use the service lift, it doesn't work. They don't hear their colleague as he's trapped closer to the floor below than the one above. Trapped cleaner has now been in there 18 hours or so. He's desperate. He drinks the water from the mop bucket, still pounding on the lift, hoping someone will come. 24 hours pass and his family comes to the airport to find out where he is. Their village has no telephone, at least not one that works. Colleagues haven't seen him. Maybe he's gone into the city to spend his paycheck given to him that morning. Eventually, it's been nearly 48 hours. Trapped man is feeling sick from drinking mop bucket water. He's had to use another bucket as a toilet. The smell is unbearable. A technician arrives to try to fix the broken lift. He's saved. Or not. The tech manages to get the lift back down to the ground floor, but the doors won't open. They try praying, jimmying, nothing's budging them. I think they meant prying there, it says praying. They even removed the motors and tried by hand. Eventually, they realize they'll have to cut him out. So they fire up the angle grinder and cut a 2-foot by 2-foot hole in the door. Sparks flying everywhere. That's just the outer skin. They can't get the angle grinder further to the inner door. A welded torch comes out, a gas axe or whatever you want to call it. Of course, this is flinging hot metal into the lift. The cleaner is absolutely scared smegless. He's been in the dark for 48 hours, and now someone is flinging hot metal at him. Eventually, they make a hole all the way through. He crawls out, collapses, and is taken away in an ambulance. He survived, but did not return to his job at the airport. The broken lift was still there until we left in 1995. When I returned on business in 2001, it had been repaired. I still think about the poor guy whenever I get in a lift. That is one heck of a story. I can't imagine being stuck for 48 hours in a lift and being so desperate that I'm drinking the fracking mop water to survive or feel better from the thirst. This sounds like a very, very tense and very claustrophobic movie. I just could not believe. I'm glad this person survived. But just all the fail-safes to try and alert someone that you're there just don't work at all. I wonder if this had gotten any different outcome if everybody had cell phones, if it took place years later. Story 2. I was a cabin crew during a turnaround from Dubai, UAE to Muscat, Oman, and back again. We're on ground in Muscat and hear from ground staff to take extra care of a passenger who is about to board. She was an English lady in her 50s, as you can imagine, well turned out, but unassuming all the same. But she looked completely shaken when she boarded. So what happened was she had checked in her luggage and had gone on to security. She placed her trolley bag on the conveyor belt, and she went ahead through the metal detector and was waiting on the other side for her bag. Next thing she knows, she's being detained, placed in handcuffs, and taken to a room for questioning. They take in her bag and start questioning her. Airport police officer. Did you pack this bag yourself? Lady. Yes. Airport police. So you know what's in the bag? Lady. Yes, and goes about describing what's in the bag. The questioning goes on for a while and is quite aggressive. The police officer then opens up the bag, and right on top of everything is this parcel filled with marijuana. She's aghast and protests her innocence and doesn't know anything about it. This poor lady is completely distraught. The gravity of it is hitting her, and she's inconsolable. Illicit substance trafficking anywhere is a big no-no, but in Middle Eastern countries, it can end up giving you the unaliving penalty. The officers reviewed the footage of when her bag was scanned, and when she placed her bag on the belt and turned away, a man standing right behind her in seconds undid the zip and slipped it in. She had no idea who this man was. So she was let go and free to continue traveling, but her trolley bag was confiscated as evidence. She wasn't too worried about the bag at that stage. I got her a very big brandy. Lesson to be learned is to not let your bags out of your sight, even for a second. I'm going to be flying soon, and the rest of this list is going to make me nervous, isn't it? I think it is. It's going to make me nervous, but gotta read on. Story 3. I used to work on the ramp for UPS, and we had a couple incidents in my time. One of our small aircraft was on approach and had an issue with its hydraulics. The pilot turned off his automatic systems to fix the issue manually. With no warning to tell him otherwise, he landed the plane without landing gear. Told this story before, but we used to ship crates of bees in our system. A box broke loose mid-flight in a Beech 99. The pilot had to declare a state of emergency, take the plane as high as it could go to subdue the bees, and then land as quickly as he possibly could. We had an employee mangle his hand trying to attach a tow bar to the front wheel. Blood was fracking everywhere, and that hand was never the same. But the scariest might not be what happens at an airport, but who works at the airport ramp at 2 a.m. During my 3.5 years there, I worked with 3 separate unalivers or attempted unalivers. One guy got into an argument at a local college and shot someone in a classroom. Another beat his girlfriend's 3-year-old daughter to termination. He's currently on Arizona unaliving row. And most heart-wrenching for me, one of my friends, a dude who I was super cool with and I thought of as super nice, was involved in a robbery that went south. His partner ended up stabbing the woman they were trying to get money from. Then the two of them went on the run and his partner unalived him before unaliving himself. It was a dark time. I thought this last person was going to be talking about people who had previously gone through and served their time and had gotten this job, and that's what's scaring him. It's weird that all of these people went on to this kind of a dark path from working at this kind of job. Almost kind of makes you wonder how the guy telling the story is doing. Story 4. I got flagged for a random TSA pat-down, and the agent asked me if I had any metal in my body, to which I said, I have an IUD. The agent freaks out and starts flagging other agents over. She musters all her calm and says, please repeat that you have an IED on you, to which I had to say, no, an IUD, a copper intrauterine device for birth control. She didn't know what an IUD was. I bet she'll remember now. Not nearly as funny, but similar misunderstanding of IUD. Grandmother. You better start taking birth control if you don't want to get pregnant. Me. Well, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I got an IUD. Grandmother. Shakes head. Unbelievable. Drinking and driving. Story 5. Not me, but my father was regional manager of one of the rental car companies at the airport. And on 9/11, when all flights were grounded, everyone needed rental cars, and it was havoc. My father said the phone rang and he almost didn't answer because he was so busy. It turns out it was the company CEO who ordered him to hand out keys for free. No cost, No documentation, as the situation was severe and all other major rental companies followed suit. Not necessarily strange, funny, or scary, but it is one of the few stories he told me about the job as a kid that I always remember. One of my uncles was in the air on 9/11. He said they made an emergency landing in Dallas, and while everyone else stopped to call their family, he sprinted for the rental car area and got one of the last ones. Story 6. Worked for a summer as a skycap at an airport in Maine. A couple of the 9/11 hijackers came through that airport and then to Logan in Boston, which is where the hijacking took place. They chose this airport in Portland precisely because it was kind of podunk and no one would pay attention as much. A guy I worked with actually showed them where the rental car place was because the way the airport was set up back then was in this weird corner and people would ask for our help to find it constantly. Poor guy felt like he was in some way responsible. I'll bet 1,000 people who interacted even just a little bit with the hijackers felt like they were in some way responsible. That would be really weird. What if you interacted with one of those people? I mean, their faces were all over the news. And if you knew that you had interacted with someone even very briefly, what would you think? Would you think you were responsible even if you just said one or two words to them? Do you think you would have made a difference if you did? Let me know. Story 7. A little different, but I work avionics on F-22s in the Air Force. Most of the work is done outside. One day on mid-shift, we get told to go inside, turn off the lights, and not look outside. Not knowing what the heck was going on, we obviously complied. Once everyone was inside, the big stadium lights that covered the entire airfield were turned off, and all the entire airfield was dark. We heard low rumbling in the distance that was getting closer, and rumors started flying. We were under attack, aliens, you name it. Eventually, we could hear 3 large planes fly very low overhead and be gone. After 15 more minutes, we were given the go-ahead to go back outside and back to work. To this day, I still don't know what the heck happened. I would assume that it was a classified prototype they didn't want seen.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 8. I worked at a corporate aircraft maintenance place. We had a situation where this crazy woman somehow got out of the secured ramp area. By the time one of our line service guys saw her, she had the main entry door opened up on a Global XRS aircraft. When he pulled up, she looked at him and asked if he could help her get her bags on board. When he told her he couldn't, she told him she was going to fly the plane to China and didn't want to be late. After that occurrence, the security at our airport became insane. I have so many questions. Story 9. I work at my local airport. I live on a tiny island, and this airport is smaller than our library. And just last summer, we had a hurricane looking down on us. Everyone is getting packed up to evacuate. We're renting cars like crazy to people fleeing, and we're trying to get them out of the storm area. I was out checking on the cars we had, and when I walked back up, there was a man sitting on a bench out front with an apocalyptic-looking storm bearing down on us, wind whipping everywhere, just soulfully playing the trombone. No idea where he came from or what he was doing, but it was surreal, like something out of a David Lynch film. I'm pretty sure he was just doing his job. Story 10. Dad ran a business in Missouri and hired a mechanic who ended up being horrible. Left his tools everywhere, trucks he worked on would break down, everything was covered in oily fingerprints, etc. Employee was fired and forgotten. Fast forward a few years, my parents are on their honeymoon in Cancun getting on the plane to come back home when the pilot announces over the PA system that the plane can't take off for a while because of maintenance. My dad looks out the window at the wing and sees oily fingerprints and tools all over the wing and the ground. His old mechanic walks out from under the wing and begins working under a panel on the wing. Dad gets super worried and wants off the plane immediately. Story 11. Not me, but a friend. He used to work refueling planes. Most days during lunch, he would sit in the airport and watch people. Anyway, a cart with a bunch of baggage rolls by, and the bag on the end falls off without anyone noticing. But him. After some time, security is notified of the unknown bag. Taking all precautions, security brings in the bomb-sniffing dog to check it out. The dog sniffs it for a second, and then all of a sudden begins to dry hump the bag. This was all before 9/11. Story 12. I used to do cargo for Delta and British Airways. We ship a lot of unalive people. A lot of animals, too. They actually sent me to LA to go to a class entirely on animal handling. There's regulations and procedures for everything, all the way up to elephants and whales and stuff. The weirdest thing we ever got to actually ship was an alligator of some sort. A whale. On an airplane. Flying. Story 13. Worked at Perth Airport until recently. Most flights in Perth go to Bali, and you see some right characters. Read Ballybogans. A Jetstar flight was delayed by 7 hours, and a woman and her husband used the time to get absolutely drunk-faced. The woman fancied a cigarette, and rather than go outside and go through security again, lit up in the middle of the duty-free. My colleagues quickly tried to stop her, but she told them to frack off. Cue airport police, $10,000 fine, and no flight to Bali. Should have listened to the staff. Story 14. Plane landed on a really freaking windy day in the winter, so there was still some ice on the ground. Kind of funny and a little scary. Luckily, no passengers were on board. Worked at a tiny little airport with puddle hopper planes. I went out to flag the plane in and watched incredulously as the wind blew the entire plane sideways toward the ditch next to the taxiway. The pilot had to do some serious engine revving to keep the plane from going into the ditch. Story 15. A school friend's father worked on passport control at Gatwick in the mid-'80s. In those days, passports were often handwritten and had spaces for things like distinguishing features. One day, a young woman presented her passport to him, and he opened it and compared the photo, and then paused before saying, "This is a bit unusual." He showed her the open passport, which read in part, "Distinguishing features. Big boobs." She exclaimed, "My bloody brother, I'll unalive him." Story 16. Pittsburgh International. 3 a.m. or so several years ago. Watched an older woman tumble down the up escalator. Every time she flipped over, she yelled, "I'm okay," like Filbert from Rocco's Modern Life. Flop, "I'm okay." Flop, "I'm okay." Flop, "I'm okay." Rolled in place for maybe a minute before someone shut the thing off. That sounds hilariously painful.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.